Globex for having me here. It's great to be in Miami. I'm based in Toronto, so it's a little bit warmer here than back home. But of course, I didn't tell my wife we were having a good time on the weather. What I'm going to be talking about is global well-being solutions. So workplace options. Maybe just to let you know, because you haven't heard about it before. We serve about 53 million employees in over 200 countries and territories, and we have a number of service centers around the world, about 12 of them, in Canada, in England, Ireland, Lisbon, Bangalore, Tokyo, Singapore, Jakarta, I always forget a couple, as well as 38 different partners around the world. So we have a network of individuals that we can tap into to serve either employees or the dependents. And really well-being programs, they've been around for 30-something years now. But it's only in the past 5 years that we've seen a big push for the globalization of those programs. So multinationals had different initiatives in different countries, and now they're looking at making sure there's consistency with those programs for all employees, not just expats like they used to historically, but also local nationals. And obviously it started with North American multinationals or UK-based multinationals, but now we started to see Indian-based multinationals or Chinese-based multinationals or other organizations that are based in other markets to really serve the populations around the world. So what I'm going to be talking about is what are some of the drivers beyond that globalization? What are the challenges faced by those same organizations? I'm going to be talking about some of the programs that are available. And last, I'll talk about some of the best practices and also tools available to you as brokers. So I just want to make sure I get a feel here. So how many people are from either Canada or the US? Yeah, this one. Okay, how many from Europe? Okay, India? Okay, good. Anybody from Latin America? Asia? Okay, good. All right, so I don't think there's a week or maybe even a day without some study out there talking about the cost of stress in the economy. So Australia did some research, and they found out that it costs them $11 billion a year in terms of workplace productivity. Canada is estimating the cost of workplace stress to $51 billion a year. And the US is $300 billion, and in Europe, I think it's 250 euro per citizen. So there's obviously a significant cost. On average, 60% of workers globally faced some workplace stress. And China has the highest with 86%. So it's really touching every single countries nowadays. So obviously, the workplace can create stress because maybe you have a bad manager, maybe you have a conflict with a colleague, maybe you are nervous about a downsizing, right? Maybe there's going to be some relocation. Maybe there's bad communication within the organization, right? That creates stress. Extreme example could be sexual harassment or bullying going on in an organization. All of that creates stress. And of course, when you go home, you take that stress with you, and that has an impact in your family life, right? And vice versa. There's things happening in your personal life that impact the workplace. Employers nowadays and HR professionals understand when employees come to the office in the morning, they don't leave the personal issues at the door. They stay with them all day long, right? So depending on where you are in the life cycle, whether you're a young employee in your early 20s, maybe starting a family, or trying to buy a house for the first time, or starting a new career, or whether you are in your mid-50s, close to retirement, or maybe in the middle, famous sandwich generation, right, in your mid-40s, and you have kids and parents to take care of, and maybe pets. It can be challenging, right? And so you bring that to the workplace, you know, and obviously what that creates is what we call presenteeism. You know, you're physically there, but mentally you're distracted. So that obviously has a cost for employers. So I decided to just use that single quote that basically stressed employees are 50% less productive. So let's talk about stress for a minute, because culturally it can be viewed differently from one country to the next, right? So I'm a French American, by the way. I live in Canada, but I was born in France, and I lived in the States for a long time. And stress in general in the States can be a very positive thing, right? I work 80 hours a week, and that means, you know, my employers need me, right? I feel good about it. As opposed to in France, if you work, 35 hours a week and you stress about it, then it's a negative thing, right? There's nothing positive about it, right? So, and it's the same word in French and English, by the way. So it's, so let's be fair. Stress is like cholesterol. There's a bad stress and there's a good stress, okay? So this is called the human performance curve from Yerkes Dobson. And basically, it dictates that the performance increase with the tension or stress up to a certain point. So too much stress is obviously not good. In some extreme example, it leads to disease, right? Or depression, burnout. Right? But too little stress is also bad. And in fact, there's some surveys out there that, you know, if people are not stressed enough, they can be bored, they can be frustrated, and obviously they're not going to be productive, right? In France this year, there's the first lawsuit of an employee who was basically paid very well, but was not doing much at work. So he sued the employer for not burnout, but bore out, which is a new term that's, you know, I hadn't heard of until this year. But yeah, I guess only the French can do that. So
he really was bored.
No, he was truly bored. Basically,
Yeah, he really was if he had time to come up with
seriously,
that.
yeah. But to the point of suing your employer
Serious.
about it, you know, that's interesting.
Just look for another job.
So, and then of course there's the positive stress, right? So this is where you want to be, right? This is where you are your peak. So negative stress obviously leads to disengaged employees, distracted employees, underperforming employees, and of course talk about sickness, and you know, it leads to absenteeism or turnover. So what we see, and like I said, we serve a fairly large number of employees in a lot of countries, and we've been around for 35 years. So what we have observed is there are four things happening to employees, and I know there's only three wheels, but I'll get there in a minute. So the first thing is the poor mental health. Depression is the main cause of disability around the world, according to the World Health Organization. And remember, most people who actually are facing depression, they actually go to work, right? So imagine about, you know, if you are in that situation, how effective or productive you can be at work. 25% of adults suffer from some diagnosable mental illness. It's a big, big number. We know that millennials experience more depression than any other generations in the workplace. The second point is the poor physical health, right? So nearly 30% of the world population is either obese or overweight, right? 68% of all deaths are caused by non-communicable disease. 80% of those non-communicable diseases share four risk factors: poor diet, physical inactivity, tobacco use, and alcohol abuse. All of it preventable. The third is the lack of work-life balance. So employees will choose a job or leave a job because of work-life balance, right? On average, 30% of the workforce has caregiving responsibilities. They're caring for a child or an elder person, or maybe a neighbor or a friend, right? We know that on average, people who are caregiver caregiving responsibilities, they spend 28 hours a week in caring for somebody. If you're caring for somebody who has Alzheimer, you'll be spending on average 6 hours a day caring for somebody else, right? So employees expect the employers to do a lot more to help them juggle that personal life. You may have heard some initiative in Sweden. They are experiencing the 6-hour workday. Anybody heard of that? And they realized that, your typical work is 8 hours, right? And they realized that people could be a lot more effective working 6 hours versus 8. So, so we see quite a few things happening there. Now the last thing is, I told you there would be 4 main challenges, right? Crashes. And crashes are obviously, Jen talked about it a little bit earlier, is anything from a terrorist attack or the earthquake in Italy, or obviously a few years ago in Japan. Those events can happen anyway, and it can impact a fairly large number of people, right? And it can paralyze an organization. I'll give you an example. We had a client in the retail sector. They had employees in Paris during the November terrorist attack and in Brussels. And after the Brussels event, they, a few days later, they called us and said, the HR person called and said, we are a little concerned, 50% of all the retail staff does not want to come back to work. And that was not the case when it happens in Paris, right? And what they realized is, so in Paris it happened on a Friday, and by Monday everybody was back to work. They were shaken up, right? Obviously they were a little bit scared, but they were back at work. And all those retail staff were living in the city of Paris, okay? As opposed to in Brussels, what they realized is, first of all, there was a very high proportion of young female workers who were not living in Brussels, but more like in the suburbs. They were living with their parents, maybe even in the countryside. And what they were getting is pressure from their parents, like, you're not going back to that big city where, there's bad people doing bad things, right? And so, as you can imagine, 50% not, threatening not to come back to work, that's a big part, right? But reality is crisis does not have to be a large-scale event. It can be a very small event. Somebody died from a heart attack. That happened every day. Somebody had a cancer and they passed away, right? And now that impacts a small team of individuals who are working together. That's a crisis. It's a small one, but it's still a crisis. Or a downsizing, or maybe a relocation, or a merger. All those things can be considered as a crisis. So obviously that results in lower performance and lower engagement level. In fact, only 13% of employees around the world are truly engaged. That's a very low number. Almost 25% are actively disengaged. So I wanted to share with you some stats to have it in writing, but if you're interested, we have stats for every single country they can think of. So I can email it to you if you want to take pictures. And there's lots of stats for Canada, by the way.
We'll grab them.
Canada is one of those countries that's done a lot of research. There are some countries that are a bit more tricky to find good data. One that I like is the lack of sleep. We know there's a link between lack of sleep and chronic conditions, but also your ability to fight a cold. I woke up this morning with my voice is gone, right? And I'm like, what am I doing? And of course, I didn't sleep enough last night. And
were you at the casino with Mike?
No, he was not.
No, I didn't party, and I was not singing either. But for some reason,
He was rehearsing.
I had a birthday party on Saturday and on Friday, and so now I'm paying the price for that. But it's true, in the winter, I don't know if you noticed that, but if you have a few nights where you sleep less than 7 hours, guess what? You're gonna be sick, right? So everything is connected. Okay, so the merits of well-being programs have over the years increased, right? And now it's part of many multinationals' benefit strategy. I think in 2015 there's about 42% of employers who have